All right, thank you, Doug. As I look out and see you, I realize that many of you were going to high school at some period of time when I was going to high school. And you were my high school heroes. And the reason you were my high school heroes is that you did things very well. And some of you did everything very well. You excelled in what you did. And I noticed you. And I admired you. And to some extent, I wanted to be like you. But I wasn't. So, what I did, I wanted to tell you today about a subject that I think will increase your base of knowledge and make your life better. And it's a subject that I'm sure you never had a speech about. In fact, maybe nobody's ever had a speech about. And that's this. Back in our day, what was life like playing on the third team of the Seminole Chieftains football? Now, you women in the audience, you don't know nothing about the third team because you weren't allowed to play football. Some of you guys don't know anything about the third team because you didn't choose to play football. And a bunch of you guys in here played football, but you were so good, you never had to suffer through the third team. But this boy is an expert. I only played football for the Chieftains 1 year, my junior year. The football season of 1955. And I was a mainstay on the third team. And you're thinking, well, if old Dale was on the third team, how in the world did he get in the Hall of Fame? Well, I'll assure you it wasn't my football play. I was a tennis player. But in those days, in the 8th grade, I didn't want to be a tennis player. I wanted to be a football player. I wanted to be a running back for the Seminole Chieftains, and not just a running back. I wanted to be a star running back. And when I graduated, I wanted to be a star running back for the OU Sooners under Bud Wilkinson. There was one problem I had. In the 8th grade, I was 4'11", and I weighed 85 pounds. Now, how would a guy like that get this grandiose idea? Well, it was my neighborhood. I lived in a neighborhood with Raymond Casey. He was 3 doors down from me, and there he was a high school All-American, one of the best football players ever to play at Seminole. 4 doors up the other way was Charlie Joseph, state champion football team, and he was back of the year. And then my brother-in-law, Don Gilliland, who now I just consider him my brother, because he's been my brother-in-law since I was in the 6th grade.
Me too.
So, anyway, Don played on that 1949 team that played in the state championship game. And by the way, you know, he was my hero then also because in the Miami game, which was the semifinals game, he made 3 touchdowns. So I was surrounded by these great football players, and I wanted to be like them. You know, I knew I was going to grow like Buddy Vance. And I was going to be that. And I didn't want to be a tennis player. Well, in the 8th grade, then, just before it started, the coach of the junior high team was Bub Slagle. He was the biggest human being I had ever seen up close at that time. But that was before I got to be up close to Homer Simpson. It was a whole lot bigger than that. But anyway, Bub Slagle was my Little League baseball coach that summer before the 8th grade. And so I knew him and he knew me, and I think we were okay with each other. So I saw in the paper that if you want to try out for the junior high team, go check out a uniform on a certain day, and then a day or so after that, you then have the first day of practice. So I got Don Gilliland to take me up there because I knew he had stroke up there. And Herb, I don't know if you were the equipment manager when I was in 8th grade, but I think you were. Anyway, it seemed like you were there 26 years. But anyway, whoever it was gave me a uniform. Man, was I proud. I was going to be a football player. So I showed up on time at first practice. And I put on that uniform, and man, did I look good. Except they had gotten the smallest uniform that they had in the school. And still, I looked like a baby turtle in an adult turtle shell. Now visualize that. And so I got the uniform on, all the other guys did, and you know, I looked up at them. And so then it was time to go out on the practice field, and Bub Slagle stood at the door, and we all lined up, and he'd say encouraging words to each guy, hit them on the shoulder pads, and they'd go on. And I was about 3 or 4 back in line, and I thought, you know, he'll remember me from baseball, and he'll probably say, Dale, sure glad you're out for football, and I know you'll really work hard at it. So when I got up there to Bub Slagle, and I looked up, he looked down at me, and he said, Crowder, what are you doing here? And I said, Coach, I'm here to play football. How much do you weigh? I said, I weigh 85 pounds. Yeah, soaking wet. He said, Crowder, these boys are big. They're fast and they're tough and mean. You'll get hurt. Why don't you come back next year when you're a little bigger? Well, when you're 4'11" and you weigh 85 pounds and you're looking up at the biggest human being you've ever seen before, you don't argue. So I turned, went back, checked in my suit, started going home. By the way, later I figured out Bub Slagle probably saved my life. And I love the man for it. But anyway, on the way home, I thought, next year I'm coming back, I'm going to be bigger, stronger, faster, and better. They haven't heard the last of me. Well, the next year, I'd grown some. I'd gone from 85 to 90 pounds. And I had gone from 4'11" to 5 feet. And that wasn't quite big enough. And then my sophomore year showed, well, I'm about to skip an important thing. A fortuitous thing happened to me in the 9th grade. And that was because Coach Simmons and others decided to switch from the single wing to the T formation. And you're thinking, well, what difference does that make to you, Dale? You aren't going to play in either one. They brought in an assistant coach who knew the T formation named Chuck Boyle. He had been a quarterback in college on the T formation, and he had been an assistant coach for some school on that formation. But when he wasn't coaching in the summertime, he was the tennis pro at Southern Hills Country Club, where the rich boys played. And he was my gym teacher the first semester. And he said sometime during that semester, if any of you guys want to learn to play tennis, which I didn't, he said, the second semester, we're going to have a tennis class. And my mother had kept saying to me, Dale, why don't you learn to play tennis? She had done that before that. Because she knew I wasn't going to be a football player. because she knew, based on our family's genetics and my 3 older brothers, that I wasn't ever going to be very big, and if whatever size I got, it wasn't going to be till I was a senior, or maybe even in college, because our growth patterns we didn't mature on schedule and stuff like that. So she knew that, but she didn't tell me. She didn't want to crush my dream. She used psychology and kept saying, Dale, why don't you learn to play tennis? Well, I had finally borrowed my sister Lois's tennis racket and gone out and talked somebody into playing, and it wasn't any good. We were just playing hit and giggle. But you remember when you first started, that's what we played, hit and giggle. But it wasn't any fun. Well, so here was Chuck Boyle, and he was a tennis pro. And so I took that class, and he taught me the basic fundamentals of tennis. And the main thing is it gave me the desire to want to learn the game and keep going. But football was still what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a football player. I wasn't much, but I was quite a bit bigger relatively, but still very tiny for a football player in my sophomore year, so that was out of the question. So my junior year comes along, and my good friend Gerald Wood, who's going to be inducted today, and we're filming this because I wanted to show him this because he might sue me if he doesn't get sick, because I'm going to say a bunch of stuff about him. But I've got a good lawyer, so. But anyway, Gerald and I got our heads together. And by the way, if you had looked at us at that time, you would have thought we were twins. As juniors, we weighed 120 pounds, and we were 5'7". But I'm still growing. I'm going to catch you. We were 5'7", 120 pounds, and we said, if we're ever going to play football, we better go out this year. So we did. We went out, and we made the 3rd team, Raymond.
There you go.
You bet we did. We were on there. We had those pads and everything. Now, the 3rd team is very, very important to a football program because we had a job to do, and we were so important, we had a special name, the Hamburger Squad. And that wasn't because we loved hamburgers, even though we did. It was because every practice we just got ground up and ground up. But we loved it. Now, one of the jobs that we had as a 3rd teamer was the blocking dummy practice. Now what we would do, they would have these big linemen like Casey and others. He was over that time, but we had some tough ones, I'll tell you. Our job was to hold this blocking dummy. It's made out of canvas, got handles on both sides, and it's about yay big. We could hold it like that, you know, and have somebody that weighs from 50 to 100% more than you do, come at you as fast as they can go, leave their feet, and hit that dummy. And you just prayed that they hit that dummy and not this dummy. But after a while, we learned 2 ways not to hold it. Not to hold it. You never hold that dummy right out in front of you. Now, you didn't have to take my dad's physics class to understand the physics. If one of those big linemen comes and hits that and you're right behind him, because you go over backwards and the next thing within 2 seconds they're calling the equivalent of 911. They didn't have 911 then, but whatever the equivalent was, they called it. The other way you gotta get out of that is you hold it way out here, and when that player leaves their feet, you turn loose of it. And they hit it, and they just go sprawling. Well, you're standing there kind of smug, and about 2 seconds later, they need to call 911 again for you, because that guy has decided he wants to have a conversation with you while you're on the ground. Well, I learned some techniques. One of them was, and you have to learn, we were smart. You might not think so, because why would we even be out there if we were? But one of the techniques I had, I didn't hold it way out here and I didn't hold it here. I held it about right here. And when that lineman would hit it, I would give enough resistance that they didn't just sprawl there, but they go down like that, and then I'd fall down, they'd think they knocked both of us down, thinking they really did a job. But you know, they figured it out pretty soon. So I had to figure something out. Well, my two biggest fears were the late Marlon Tiger and Pritchard, Jerry Pritchard. Those guys were tremendous football players, and they were awesome. Marlon Tiger was a giant of a man. He was a gentle giant, and I knew him and liked him, and he liked me, and we'd known each other quite a while. But when he was on that football field, when he came off that line, he was like an enraged bull that hadn't seen a cow in a year. Now visualize that. But the good news for me, Marlon Tiger lived a long ways from school. And Marlon Tiger didn't have a car. You kind of see where I'm headed, don't you? He would catch a ride with various players, but every once in a while, when he didn't have one, I'd give him a ride home. And he appreciated those rides. And when we had the dummy practice and I was holding it on Marlon's side, well, let me put it this way. He was kind to me. But then there was Jerry Pritchard. He was on the other side of the line. Now, what was I going to do with Jerry Pritchard? The car deal was out. Jerry Pritchard lived across the street from the school. In fact, from the practice field to his house was closer than the practice field to where I parked my car. So I couldn't think of anything else to negotiate with him on. So what I did was, when the coach would say, dummy drills, I ran faster than I ever ran any time during the season, over to Marlon's side. And so that solved that problem. I let Pritchard, wipe out somebody else. But then we had offensive drills. And we had to tackle the first teamers. Larry Rundle. I'll never forget that name. Larry Rundle was not the biggest player out there, but he was all muscle. And I have suspected for years that Larry Rundle is not his real name. I think he's real. Well, let me just ask you. Have you ever seen Larry Rundle and Superman in the same room at the same time? Larry Rundle is Superman. And there's further evidence of it, is when I would be back there listening and getting ready to either run or tackle, depending on who had the ball, I'd watch Rundle, and when either the tailback would hand it to him or he'd take it directly from center, or the snap back, I'd see that coy smile, and I'm pretty sure I could hear him say, "This is a job for Superman." And as he would crash through the line, I know I heard him say, "Up, up, and away!" And he would fly for 45 yards, leaving 6 or 7 third-teamers flat on their face, pounding the turf, moaning. He is Superman. Well, the good news is August finally ends sometimes when you're having 2-a-day football practices. And it ended, and the season started, and we got our game suits. Oh, boy, were they neat. I mean, the home jersey was green, white numerals, white pants with a green stripe. Man, did we look good. And I wanted Don Gilliland's number 23, but somebody already had it, so I figured 23, flip it, that's 32. I got 32. I was number 32. Well, I've forgotten Gerald's number, but he and I were the bench warmers. Well, lots of bench warmers, all 13, but Gerald and I sat next to each other. And we may have been the best bench warmers that Seminole High School has ever had, because we sat with really good posture and we listened to everything the coach said. We had the playbook memorized, We cheered on our team. We were ready to go in if called upon, and we never sat on our helmets. Well, the first game came, and we continued to sit with good posture. Second game came, and we didn't get to play. Third game came, we didn't get to play. Fourth game came, didn't get to play. And then Holdenville came. And the first team of the Seminole Chieftains mauled them. The second team did really well too. And there was about a minute left, and the score was 55-7 in favor of the Chieftains. And I was sitting there on the bench knowing a minute was left, and I'd get ready to, pack up and go in the locker room. I hadn't noticed that Gerald Wood had gotten up off the bench and walked over to Coach Simmons. And I found out later, Gerald told me what happened. He said, "Coach, we're way ahead. I want to play." I wouldn't have ever had the nerve to do that. But Gerald did. And Coach Simmons looked down at him. Gerald said, "I was like that." He was 5 feet taller than me. And he looked down and said, "Wood, I don't know. You'll get hurt." Now, why these big guys think all the little guys are going to get hurt, I don't know. Those big guys were born big guys. They don't know anything about little guys. But that's what he said. But Gerald said, "I don't care. I want to play." And the next thing I know, Dwayne Oliver, who was our third team coach, said, "Third team, go in." And I grabbed my helmet and I put it on. And I thought, I'm going to get to play in a real high school game. And so I started trotting out on the field. I can, to this day, remember every stride. It was like Rudy in the movie Rudy, and it was slow motion. Man, number 32, I could hear the whole Seminole crowd cheering for old number 32. Well, maybe not cheering for me. Probably my parents were. But it felt like they were cheering for me. So I get out there, and there's a timeout. Holdenville had called a timeout. And I wasn't a very big player, but I understood the game. I thought, those guys are so far behind, but they called a timeout. That means they want to try one last ditch effort to make a touchdown. So they're going to want to throw a pass. And I was a defensive right halfback. And I thought, I'm going to intercept me a pass, and I'm going for a touchdown and be the hero of the third team. And I'll bet no third teamer's ever done that. So I was out there, and they called time in, and quarterback got down there, and I thought, I'm going to be on that receiver like a leech on a turtle's back. Now visualize that. All right. And so finally, here it comes. The quarterback takes the ball, and he goes back, and sure enough, here comes the receiver, and he's looking toward the guy I'm guarding. And I was so close to that guy and covered him so well, they could have taken one suit of clothes and put on both of us. And I thought, I am going to intercept this. And he drew back like that, and the next thing I know, the receiver from the other side comes behind him, takes the ball in the old Statue of Liberty play, and he comes around my side. And I thought, well, somebody's supposed to be turning him in, because you see, when somebody comes to the outside, you're supposed to turn him in where we got tacklers. We ain't got no tacklers out there. But here I am. I'm out there by myself, and he's got a third of the field over there, and here I am. And I start after him, and I'm just a novice, and they had their first team in. He puts one fake on me, and I go for it like this, and then he cuts back the outside, and I'm stumbling around. And I chase after him, and he's running down the sidelines, and I know I can't catch him, but I've got to look like I made the effort. So I ran as fast as I could. I did a leap and dive into the air. On a rating of a dive, it was probably an 8 or 9 on a 10 scale. And I hit that ground about 3 or 4 feet, away from him. So I didn't touch him. If it was touch football, he still scores. He goes and scores. I was humiliated and thought, old number 32 will never live this down. And then I started getting upset. Why didn't somebody turn him in? If they'd have turned him in and done what the coaches told them, I wouldn't be looking like a goofus out here. I didn't know the answer to who didn't turn him in for 40-some years. And I was at my youngest son's wedding, and my good friend, that's been my dear friend since the 3rd grade, Gerald Wood, was there too, and we were telling my sons about this heroic game. And I moaned and groaned again after all those years and said, I don't know who didn't turn him in, but I wish they had have. And Gerald said to me, Dale, I was the guy who decided to turn him in. And I said, well, Gerald, why didn't you do it? And he said, because when they snapped the ball, a great big lineman came over and gave me a forearm shiver right in the head. And I just saw stars, and I didn't know what was going on until well after the touchdown was made. And so I realized, well, I can't be mad at Gerald about that. I'm just thankful it wasn't me. So that solved that mystery, but here I'm still out here humiliated. And the next thing I know, they say, okay, line up for the extra point. Well, 3rd teamers never got to practice for an extra point because there's no reason to. I didn't know where to stand. So we all lined up there, and I thought, well, I'll just go find me a gap where I don't see somebody that's just trying to eat me alive. And so I stood in this gap, and they snapped the ball, and I charge in. I must have been so out of position that nobody was assigned to block me. And the next thing I know, there I am, and there's nothing but me and the holder and the kicker right there. And my mind's going in milliseconds. And I thought, I'm going to get kicked in the face. And I put my arms up like that, not to block that ball, but to protect my face. And just as I did that, the milliseconds are going on both sides. That holder realized I was on him. I had busted his play. And he grabbed that ball and raised up, and he was a fullback type, kind of like Rundle, but not nearly as good. All right. He raised up, and he had that ball like that, and it was just me and him. It was like a grizzly bear and a panda bear. And he started right for me, and I thought, now I've got 2 choices. And this is milliseconds. So I could just dive down on the ground, and people think I got blocked. Or I could do what I wanted to do and be a football player. So I opened my arms like that and got down like the coaches taught me, and that guy ran right into me, and I wrapped that and put the Crowder lock on him, fell over backwards and hung on for dear life, and he hit that ground 2 feet shy of the goal line. He did not make that point. If you look at the annual today, in 1956, you will see, 54, 55, whatever it was, when I was a junior. You look in there, it'll have the Holdenville score, 55-13. Forever it will be 13 because I stopped that. But I'm lying on the ground with that guy on top of me, and the 3rd team, everybody wanted to do something. And they hadn't got to do anything much. And so they, through their exuberance, when we hit that pile, they all start jumping on the pile, trying to act like they're tackled. I felt every one of it. But I still had a smile on my face because I knew in a moment that Mr. Mitchell would announce, tackle made by Dale Crowder. And when I heard that, I knew that that would make my season. That would be worth all that I had gone through just to hear that and have the audience hear that. And so they began to unpile each guy. And finally I heard Mr. Mitchell say, tackle made by Terry Chase. I can't believe it. Terry Chase, all he did was pile on. I made that tackle. Well, I got up, got dressed, went in, and the next game, we had about 6 or 7 more games. Third team never got to play again, but I got to play that day, and it was 55-13. And so I could say, statistic-wise, and we all love statistics if they help us, that when I was on the field, I made 50% of the tackles. Now, you know, I realize others could say, well, when you were on the field, 50% of the time, the guy ran over you and made a touchdown. But don't tell anybody about that. Don't tell anybody about that. But Gerald and I then got together after the season and said to each other, you want to play next year? We said no. I think we need to concentrate on something else. So my concentration then was tennis. By that time, I had been playing for Coach Dewey Allen for a year, and then my junior year, the second semester, would be the next season. So I had the privilege and honor to play for Dewey Allen, who's a wonderful, wonderful man, and changed my life. And I got to play for the Chieftains as a tennis player. And then, because of that, I got to play for Oklahoma Baptist University as a tennis player on a couple of conference championship teams. And as a result of that, the Hall of Fame committee was kind to me and inducted me into the Hall of Fame, for which I'm grateful, proud, and humbled. But also, I'm grateful, proud, and humbled to have an opportunity to speak today to my high school heroes. Thank you very much.